Welcome to Unpacked, a COVID-19 inspired video interview series where I get the stories behind my favourite new songs. For this episode, I speak to Graham Ashton about his brand new project called Gesticulations. The first single, Stay Curious, was written over a period of 15 years about his dear friend. It was produced on the Gold Coast by Benny D. Williams and also features the vocals of Hannah Campbell. We talk about punk poetry and how it influenced his sound, and also how some of the lyrics tip their hat to some contemporary punk poets. Hope you enjoy. Welcome, Graham.
Hello, Zachary.
How are you going today?
I'm pretty good, thank you, mate. Hanging in there.
What's been keeping you busy during isolation? I know you guys are still working at Foot Stomp, so...
Yeah, work's going great, thankfully. So, certainly have a full-time job plus, but creatively, I've never been so creative in my life. I'm working on 3 albums at once at the moment. So
amazing.
My band, the Shambolics, are kind of halfway through demoing our second album.
Yep.
I'm starting off this solo project, Gesticulations, and I'm working on a mate's album doing vocals up here on the Sunshine Coast. So
wow,
very good time creatively.
I think I kind of alluded to it there that you work in the music industry for Foot Stomp Music, and before we get stuck into the song, I just would like to hear your expectedly optimistic view on how the music industry is going to bounce back after all this craziness.
Look, I think it's well documented how challenging it is for everybody financially, particularly while no one can play live.
Yeah.
But as you tipped, I'll come at it from an optimistic or an optimistic view. And mine is all about the creativity that's going to come out of this.
Yeah.
Look, I think if you look back at the key moments in contemporary music, almost all of the great albums were written on the back of a time of challenging times.
Yeah.
And I expect whether it's later this year or early next year to be the best albums we've heard in decades.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, me too. I mean, the great creations will come. Yeah, so but we might take a bit of a hit. Who knows? I mean, everyone's going through it at the same time. I reckon it's giving a good sense of community, if anything, as well. So, yeah.
A few months on baked beans won't kill us.
Exactly, good. All right, well, are you ready to unpack Stay Curious?
Yes, I'll do my very best.
Let's do it. So was the song written about a dream?
Not really. It was certainly part of it. It's one of my best friends, almost like my brother, passed away about 15 years ago. And around that time, Nick Cave released this CD called The Secret Life of the Love Song.
Yeah.
And there was one part of that really stuck out to me. It was a Portuguese word called saudade, which means longing, but in a positive way. It means so your memories for something that is lost aren't sad memories, they're happy memories.
Okay.
And there isn't really an English word that describes that. So I'd been trying to write a book based on this guy, this dear friend of mine called Saudade. And then this song kind of started coming about. Like the first couple of lines just fell out of the sky. And you know what it's like if you have a good opening line to a song, you're off to a good start.
Yep.
And those first lines just fell into my head one day, and I thought, oh, that's the start of a song. And then I went back through all of the words that I'd written for this book about my mate Dave, and just handpicked words like curious and marrow and things like that. And I just thought, it's not literally based on him, but it's about an energy. And he did appear in my dream around the time that I was about to record it. So that's where I guess that part of it came.
Wow. So you've been percolating a book about this guy, and you'd been kind of creatively thinking about it for so long, and then it just so happened that before you recorded it, after 15 years of percolation, you have a dream about this particular guy that's pretty great, and kind of eerie.
That's exactly what happened. So that's kind of why I thanked him for visiting me at the end of the song.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, you've kind of answered one of my questions already about that opening line, because it's super, it's just commanding. You want to listen to the rest of the song as soon as you hear it. I've got it queued up actually, which I'll give you a bit of a play of here.
You're an audacious misanthrope. You were shooting dope. Just chasing that reckless freedom.
So that was the line that started the song. Is that what you're saying? Because it was just so commanding.
Yeah, like those words just fell into my head and I thought, wow, that's got to be a song. And at that time, the Shambolics were pretty busy, and I was desperate to keep going.
Yep.
You know, when we'd finished our first album, I was just writing a lot. So I came up with this idea of doing a side project, which is a kind of like a solo project, but not really, because I'm not a very talented musician. So I need skillful people to help me. But the vision was, you know, to do this real heavy spoken word, sounding record, almost like poetry with real sparse instrumentation.
Yeah, definitely. And you can really feel that leads really into my next question as well, about how, because I know how lyrical you are, and you talk about punk poetry, which I want to delve into a little bit in a minute, but how does the music fit in? I mean, did you have ideas about the backing music, or kind of did you leave that up to production? Like, how do you see the two working together?
I always have very firm ideas on, you know, the instrumentation and the melodies and stuff. And I'd heard a bunch of records that Benny D. Williams had produced, and I'd known him a little bit. And just thought he'd be perfect because he's a multi-instrumentalist. He can play everything, even instruments that aren't instruments. So I emailed him a little bit about the idea with some references to some artists that had been inspiring me. And he came back with that riff.
Oh, okay.
And we just built the song on the riff. And that was all we had when I went into the studio. That was all we had. And the other idea of Gesticulations is a real sense of spontaneity. Like, it's not a project where there'll be really any demos done or anything. It's about going in and creating on the spot. Okay, so just so I get this clear, and did you have all of the lyrics written before you went into the studio, or were you still writing the lyrics when you went in with that guitar part and stuff like that? 99% were done. You know, like as you always do, you'll probably hear a take or something and go, oh, I think I could do better with that. But pretty much that particular song was all done. And, you know, we'd had the idea, like I always love having a female vocal to accompany me in a song, because I think it's painful for the listener to just listen to me barking at him for 5 minutes. You have the exact opposite to a beautiful female's voice. Exactly. So I'll use the word juxtaposition rather than polish a turd. But it was, and I'd met Hannah Campbell and heard her voice and just kind of just asked her if she wanted to be part of it, and she came in with absolutely no preparation. Really, and other than the lyrics, and all of the rest of it happened pretty much within a few hours. You know, it all happened with the three of us sitting in Benny's home studio, and I knew that he could. Like, I love the melodica. Has always been one of my favorite instruments since being a big fan of the Cruel Sea. And I thought that's going to just be so eerie and weird if you chuck a bit of that in the middle. And so I guess I suggested the arrangements and the ideas, and I think it's the first song I've ever worked on in my life that didn't have real drums. And I just really liked the sound of the electronic drums on this particular song. They sound pretty real. The reverb was weird, and you know, they've got a raw taste to them, but they're not real drums. But I suppose that actually you can tell we know each other because this is flowing really well. I want to have a play the Hannah Campbell part that you just talked about then, about this amazing kind of difference in voices. I'll just play it now. It'll never be black and white. What we need to scratch that itch.
Yeah, so that for me, that's the kind of latter part of the song where she takes a few of your lyrics and just repeats them over and over. And yeah, the beautiful voice of Hannah. How did that collaboration come about?
Well, really, I'd met her at HOTA at the Gold Coast Home of the Arts, and listened to her music and thought it was really cool.
Okay.
And I wanted the whole project to be very local, very Gold Coast based. And I just thought, wow, your voice would be really weird up against mine. You know, it's complete opposites. And just to have a crack, and it worked. We did 2 songs in that session. And I think in this one, I might have worked out the melody for her and sang it to her and said, here's my suggestion on what you do. But the other one, she just came in with the melody once and absolutely nailed it,
wow.
which was really different and weird and fantastic. So it was either that way round or the other way round. I can't quite remember.
Yeah. Oh, that spontaneity has really worked in your favour here, because obviously a lot of it was thought about for 15 years of percolation with the lyrical content, but you wouldn't think it was so spontaneous. Really well done with that. So the next question, you mentioned in the press release and from knowing you about this evolution of punk poetry, which I can see is a big influence in this project for you, and you also mentioned about females kind of being prevalent, especially these days, and taking the lead in punk poetry. And like, in a way, I think that they've always been the punk poets, from, you know, Patti Smith to Kate Tempest now, like they've always led the way. So yeah, can you elaborate on your take on punk poetry and what females do to it?
Totally. Look, I guess my idea of it started way back with Billy Bragg.
Okay.
And, you know, a punk poet isn't necessarily someone without a instrument. It really came from punk rockers when they would pick up the acoustic guitar and you could actually finally hear the lyric and that kind of thing. And you're so right, Patti Smith's a huge lifelong influence. And more recently, like Courtney Barnett has been massive for me. But I think one of the most important artists in Australian music history. I think, you know, if you look at the history of Australian music, and it's like pre and post Courtney, and since she came along, it's like dozens, if not hundreds, of other Australian females are kicking the boys' asses. And it's almost like she gave everyone permission to have that creative freedom and confidence and be who they want to be. And then even more recently, it's Kate Tempest. But there's I think a verse in the song which is really not so subtly kind of tipping my hat and paying tribute to my influences on this song. So no one's really picked up on it yet, but I wouldn't mind. I know you kind of brought that up, but I'm happy to unpack that little part. Mark in the dark in a red house, as the sun kills the moon. Tempestuous Kate, shining the light, showing us the way.
Wow, so is that Kate Tempest?
Of course. Well, there's 2 things in there. So there's Sun Kill Moon, were one of the real key bands that influenced this song, and the singer of that band's name is Mark, and he's from another band called the Red House Painters. So it's like Mark in the dark in a red house when the sun kills the moon. And then Tempestuous Kate is obviously tipping my hat to Kate Tempest. So I thought I'd written so much about my friend Dave in the song, I didn't have anything inspired to write for that verse. And I thought I'd just have a bit of fun with that stuff. And so that's what it was. It's just paying tribute to the influences, really.
Man, I would not have guessed that. I thought, because I knew that the song was about your mate and maybe some adventures that you guys had in a red house, and there was some Kate person showing you the way on a loose night or something like that. That's what was going through my head. It had nothing to do with hat tipping. But wow, there you go.
I'm sure all of that stuff happened as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm sure what you imagine to be true is absolutely true. The names and the color of the house may have changed.
Yeah, you would have some wild times. Oh, it's so interesting to hear that. All right, well, yeah, I mean, talking about your adventures back in the day and looking at your first band, Way Cool Junior, which I saw a very cool photo on Facebook of you singing in your. When were you guys? When were your songs written? In the late 80s, early 90s?
Yep, that's right. Yep. So that was actually my second band.
Oh, was it?
But yeah, Way Cool Junior was, I guess, my first semi-serious band that played a lot of shows, and yeah, that was in Brisbane, kind of on the back of the second wave of punk rock in the late 80s and early 90s.
So my question for you is, what would a late 80s, early 90s Asho think of Gesticulations 2020 Asho?
It's a very good question. I would suggest probably would think it was boring old parts music.
Oh, no.
I reckon maybe a few years later when I really started digging into Lou Reed and Patti Smith. But I think in those days I was still very young and, just wanted high energy, and I don't think I'd quite hit that stage of life where I'd open my mind to all of the magic of music. I was still pretty narrow in my punk rock high energy zone. So yeah, I reckon I would have thought I was a boring old fart.
Well, I don't think you are. It's it is really interesting, and you're a classic example of someone who has just stuck with music their entire lives, and it's hat off to you. That's so amazing that you focused on one thing and just made it your own. So still releasing music, bloody awesome.
Thank you, mate. No, I can't imagine what else to do with my time that would be more fun. And I think it's just so healthy as well. Sure. Like, it's such a challenging time for so many people and, with everybody's mental health, and everyone approaches that differently. I know you and I really use the ocean for solace is a big thing for us. And for me, making a racket is the other thing, and it's not, I don't really have any, expectations of any success or anything like that. Like certainly this time around in my 50s, making music is purely for joy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're finding joy from it as well. And I think when you do kind of let that go a little bit sometimes with, who's going to hear it, as long as I'm happy making the music, sometimes that connects even harder when you're trying to impress everyone at the same time as trying to make something for yourself. So no, that's cool. A final question is about the record. Like, what's next for this project? And where is it at? When's the album?
Well, we're going back in for the next session in the first week of June. The album's called A Sense of Purgency.
Yes, there you
go. So that's exactly what it is. I'm just purging, and I'm in a hurry because I'd once heard Paul Kelly say in an interview that human beings are meant to be at their most productive in their 50s. And I worked with him around the time he turned 50, and he was putting out 2 or 3 albums a year.
Wow.
And that really stuck with me. And I'm like, and there's so much to write about. So
yeah, totally. At the moment,
there's a lot going on in all of our lives, and, mine included. And I'm just purging and trying to use that as a conduit to stay healthy. And, but the next session, I'd been posting a poem on social media every day, and a friend of mine, Deb, grabbed a hold of one and came back with this really rough demo, and it's kind of like the saddest song I've ever heard.
Wow.
And it's called Trying to Let Go, and I have always loved how really sad songs make you feel. So Deb's going to come down to the studio in June, and we're going to record that one, and cool. Well, I'm sure we'll do another one as well. So I imagine that this album will be early next year by the time it's finished.
Okay.
But who knows? The songs are certainly there.
Yeah. Just a final question about the stylistic kind of prospects for the album. Is it going to be a lot of this sparse punk poetry stuff? Do you think there'll be more sampled drums? Like, what's your vision for the way that stylistically it's going to sound?
Like, I think everything will be about that song.
Okay.
So I've always believed passionately that I guess the stylistic decisions will be made based on what is right for each song, what's going to serve each song. But in my mind, I've got a very loose kind of set of rules that I'm not going to try and sing on this. I'm going to use different other vocalists to play that role in the song and just try and tell stories vocally. And I like the way that Benny mixed the vocal, like right in your face.
Sure.
I kind of like that idea
Yeah.
moving forward. But the other song we recorded does have real drums on it.
Okay.
So, it'll just be the instruments that I like,
Yep.
like I love organ. I imagine it'll be full of organ. And I've also been listening to a lot of Gil Scott-Heron,
Okay.
who's a proper political poet from the 50s and 60s and 70s from the US. And he used really dark, weird organ sounds on a lot of his poems. So that's a big inspiration moving forward.
Cool. Yeah, I can't wait to hear it. And yeah, keep bringing out those emotions. Yeah, it's really connecting. More so probably than a lot of the other stuff you've done. It's all connected, but this really hit home, I reckon. Yeah, well done with this one, mate.
Lovely to see your face. Thank you.
So that was the 4th episode of Unpacked. Hope you enjoyed it. Catch you later.